From the killing of innocent boys and raping of girls to returning from the dead, the most well-known trials in Texas history pitted a group of small-town prosecutors against a defiant murderer. On the other hand, 3 teenagers were found dead, and this was the largest case of their lives. What could be the causes of the massive killings in Texas? Was it planned, or was it just something personal? And why did it take Texas that long to capture the criminal? This is the shocking 1966 Texas murders that spooked investigators. How it all started. In 1966, the Everman, Texas Sheriff's Department was called to the scene of a horrific incident over 30 years prior. A nearby farmer had discovered the bodies of 2 young boys in the trunk of an abandoned car. However, the execution style of the murders puzzled the local sheriff. A farmer who claimed to know the children found the body. Alvin Stone and his cousin Duncan Liam grew up in Everman. Meanwhile, on Saturday night, authorities discovered that their parents had not seen them after their visit to a 17-year-old Nora Jim, Alvin's lover. Nevertheless, a young man named Roy Dale Green turned himself to the local sheriff, and he stated that he needed to come clean. Green informed Sheriff Brady Pamplin that Kenneth McDuff, a neighborhood bully, had abducted and tortured all 3 of the young teenagers, and Sheriff Pamplin was familiar with McDuff's name. Green revealed McDuff's crime. At the age of 17, he had already locked him up for robbery, assault, and burglary. Green said to the sheriff that when driving through the tiny village of Everman with McDuff, they noticed 2 boys and a girl standing beside a car next to a baseball field. McDuff threatened to kill Green if he revealed to anyone that he was looking for a girl to rape and murder. Green reported that as they drew closer to the baseball field, McDuff exited the vehicle, holding a gun, and approached the 3 teens, while Green stood by the vehicle. He claimed that he didn't think McDuff actually intended to harm anyone, and that he was merely playing around with the idea of frightening them a little. But the terrified teenagers could see that McDuff was serious. He seized their wallets while holding them at gunpoint. He told the 3 teenagers to get into the car's trunk while Green looked on.
Come on, man, get in there. Get in there. Hurry up.
Green claimed that he continued to believe McDuff was kidding, and that he simply followed the game, when McDuff threatened to destroy the teens since they had seen his face.
Fun now.
Yeah, we're gonna kill him.
Take the car, drive, follow me.
With the 3 teenagers in the trunk, McDuff took the wheel, and Roy Dale Green followed in his vehicle. They continued until they arrived at the isolated section on the opposite side of town. At last, on a dimly lit back road, McDuff stopped. How the teens were murdered. He ordered Nora out of the car, opened the trunk,
Let's stay put, just a girl.
and told the 2 boys to lie down. According to Green, McDuff instructed him to place Nora in the car's trunk.
Hey, come on over here, boy.
Meanwhile, McDuff shot both guys in the face repeatedly.
What are you doing, man?
Green claimed that when McDuff was cleaning the automobile of fingerprints, he instructed him to remove their tire marks. Later, McDuff and Green raped the young girl, and she was later choked to death on the gravel road. Green said that they covered the body with shrubs and threw it over a fence. Sheriff Pamplin began a thorough search to locate Nora Jim's body. However, Roy Dale Green attempted to assist the sheriff, but he couldn't recall where they had left the body. The search of the killer. A manhunt started at the same time to locate Kenneth McDuff. Investigators waited at the girl's residence, expecting McDuff to show up because they had information that he was going on a date that evening with a girl from Bremen, Texas. McDuff attempted to flee when he saw the authorities, but the sheriff's open fire destroyed his radiator and tires, rendering the vehicle completely unusable.
Trying to back out.
And McDuff was removed unharmed. Meanwhile, days passed before Nora Jim's body was located and her family could bury her. The killer's trial. In October 1966, Kenneth McDuff and Roy Dale Green were put on trial. Liam Duncan's murder was the first case to go to trial. Because they had a body, evidence that connected McDuff to the victim, and an eyewitness, the prosecution was certain they could secure a capital conviction. The prosecutors were able to substantiate Green's testimony with the help of crucial pieces of evidence.
Needs to be corroborated with some evidence that tends to show that he's telling the truth, or tends to connect the person he is saying is guilty.
Including the discovery of 2 victim wallets in a field and Kenneth McDuff's charred and bloody clothes buried on his older brother's property. In return for his testimony, the prosecutors would not pursue the death penalty for Roy Dale Green's role in the murders, but McDuff would get no plea bargain and he didn't want one. His mother, Anna McDuff, was one of his strongest supporters, as he denied any involvement in the crime. She had a long history of downplaying any of her son's crimes, and the prosecutors saw this as an advantage when she helped her son Kenneth accuse Green of the killings. Yet, according to McDuff, the cops were attempting to frame him, and he was innocent. It was now up to the jury to decide whether to find Kenneth McDuff guilty of murder or to declare him not guilty. Before we unveil more of this Texas murderer, please subscribe to our channel, where we bring you true crimes and cases. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video. Let us know what you think. Death sentence of Kenneth McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff, then 21 years old, was found guilty in Fort Worth, Texas, in November 1966 of killing 15-year-old Liam Duncan. McDuff didn't seem upset when the jury decided to execute him in an electric chair for the execution style carried out on the victim. The prosecutors decided not to prosecute McDuff for the deaths of the other two teens following the trial for the murder of Liam Duncan. Kenneth McDuff was given an electric chair death sentence, but he wasn't dead at that time. Ask me why. The return of Kenneth McDuff. Although he should have been executed for the brutal murder of 3 teens, Kenneth McDuff returned to the streets 4 years later, as confident, cruel, and deadly as ever. Word circulated quickly that McDuff had pledged to kill one person for every day he spent in prison on festival days in Marlin Falls County. Kenneth McDuff was back. But why did the state parole board put him back on the street? Falls County Sheriff Larry Pamplin called his longtime buddy, Waco Deputy U.S. Marshal Parnell McNamara, on October 11, 1989, and said, "You're not going to believe what happened. Kenneth McDuff is paroled." McNamara silently absorbed this illogical information before asking, "Have they gone crazy?" No other explanation seems possible. McDuff was the most brutal, sadistic, and remorseless criminal any of these senior lawmen had ever encountered. Because their fathers, Deputy U.S. Marshal T.P. McNamara and Falls County Sheriff Brady Pamplin, had witnessed McDuff's brutality, they had known him for almost 25 years. In 1966, Brady Pamplin apprehended McDuff for the 3 murders by shooting his automobile to bits as he fled. Mauricio, Brady Pamplin was continually questioned for not killing McDuff when he could have saved countless lives. The incident left a lasting impression on Larry Pamplin, Parnell McNamara, and his brother Mike, a Waco deputy marshal, who were youths like McDuff. The lawmen were furious at how McDuff had undermined authority at every turn and shattered the system. Since McDuff was 18, his 52-year sentence was served concurrently. After 3 months, McDuff was trustworthy and back on the street with his smirk, indicating that the time was well spent. McDuff was available for parole in 1976, 10 years after the killings, but the parole board was under no obligation to approve it, and few expected it. However, McDuff had time. When the parole board denied him, he kept applying until he succeeded, and police said 9 women may have died as a result. His bizarre career made headlines in Texas, especially near Interstate 35, where he pursued his victims. By the time he got back, Kenneth McDuff had put a face to the violent crime wave that had swept Texas in the previous years, thanks to a callous parole system that emptied jails rather than securing the streets. Unfortunately, a convict needs 2 votes from a 3-person parole board team to receive parole from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, which is the super board that oversees paroles, pardons, and the prison system. McDuff earned one of the 2 votes he needed in 1979 and 1980, but he lost by what must have looked like bad luck. McDuff offered a $10,000 bribe to a parole board member the following year to increase his chances. He was found guilty of bribery. Despite the gruesome murders, his 3-time loss, and his bribery conviction, the parole board considered him a good risk for release. In 1984 and 1985, McDuff was 1 vote away from independence again. He obtained a 2nd vote for parole in 1988, but the parole board revoked the approval due to new evidence. The parole board won't say what the new information was, although it would have included letters of protest from the judge and prosecution during his trial. But sadly, 3 days later, 29-year-old Serafia Parker was found naked and strangled in a Southeast Temple weed field. You don't need to ask who did that, do you? Background of the criminal. In Rosebud, when Kenneth was growing up, the McDuffs were odd and unfriendly, but they weren't white trash either. Working hard, saving money, and attending the Assembly of God Church were their habits. Kenneth's father, J.A. McDuff, was a cement finisher who made a lot of money during Temple's late 70s and early 80s building boom. Anna McDuff, his mother, was huge and dominant. She ran a washateria across from the family house on Main Street, managed the family purse, and dominated over her 4 daughters and 2 sons. If Kenneth truly came from a decent background, why was he a hard criminal? See, in the late 1950s, Kenneth's older brother Lonnie was the family troublemaker, pulling a knife on the popular Rosebud School principal, D.L. Mayo, and being tossed down the stairs for his insolence. But as the bad boy that Lonnie was, the ex-husband of a woman he was dating shot and killed him, while Kenneth was in prison for murder. Why did a 1989 parole board that was aware of McDuff's criminal history release him again? The missing prostitutes in college. McDuff moved into a campus dorm at Texas State Technical College in Waco in the spring of 1991. Instantly, several Waco prostitutes went missing, but Waco police didn't seem concerned or question McDuff. Regina Moore was caught kicking and screaming in McDuff's red pickup truck as it passed through a police checkpoint. The police investigated several days later, but found no evidence. He lived a charmed existence, beating and nearly blinding a TSTC student and threatening others without being reported to the police. Then, 1 week prior to his final examinations, McDuff completely renounced any pretense of composure. He vanished into the night sky after leaving his tan Thunderbird parked at the New Road Inn, located just south of Waco, on March 1, 1992. Afterward, less than a block away, Melissa Northup, age 22, was abducted from the convenience store where she was employed on the same evening. A few weeks later, her body was discovered floating and tied in a gravel pit in Dallas County, not far from where her killer had dumped her car. Also, the police found Valencia K. Joshua's naked and badly decomposed body in a small swallow-forested area behind TSTC a few weeks after Northup vanished. One of the missing prostitutes was Joshua. She disappeared on February 24, 1992, while searching for McDuff's dorm room at TSTC. Meanwhile, McDuff's unexpected disappearance surprised the parole board and everyone else. Also, Anna McDuff quickly reported her son being missing due to worry. Because of McDuff's past, the McNamaras knew they had to act quickly, and the system cooperated. Surprisingly, McDuff sold cocaine to an informant, which helped the law. Waco's assistant U.S. attorney, Bill Johnson, accused McDuff of gun and drug distribution based on 2 informants. McDuff accidentally became a federal fugitive, which was enough for the McNamaras to track him down. The U.S. Marshal Service had already deployed 250 detectives to Operation Gunsmoke, which was a statewide attempt to arrest violent offenders. The McDuff capture became a national priority. Earp, a relative of Wyatt Earp, sent a twin tractor-trailer rig known as Reed Colleen, one of the service's mobile command centers. However, Reed Colleen kept the task force in touch with every law enforcement agency in the nation while parked behind the federal facility in Waco. But unfortunately, Reed was kidnapped and murdered. By whom? It seemed appropriate to find one of the most notorious killers of the modern era using the Marshal Service, the nation's oldest law enforcement agency that George Washington founded in 1789. McDuff's ex-convict running companions lived in Temple and adjacent towns, so the task group searched there. McDuff's shady past was revealed layer by layer, and they questioned Holland residents. The secret child of Kenneth exposed him. It was shocking to learn Kenneth McDuff had a daughter. The lady he raped and left to die in 1964 survived and had his baby. Teresa discovered her biological father, Kenneth McDuff, was a convicted killer when she was 21 years old. After visiting McDuff in prison, Teresa admitted to the marshals that he found her attractive. Then he urged her to smuggle drugs and offered to prostitute her in Las Vegas after his parole. She reportedly told the marshals that McDuff's family paid $25,000 to a former parole board member to have him released in 1989, prompting an investigation of many former board members. Teresa went out of state to avoid Kenneth McDuff, whom she had considered fascinating. McDuff's associates initially refused to reveal much information, perhaps out of loyalty or fear. However, the Austin police were under intense public pressure to solve the Reed case. But their sources said McDuff hadn't been in Austin since October, so they discarded him as a suspect. However, the McNamaras believed McDuff was their suspect. They searched McDuff's friends for a dark-skinned white man, Kenneth's right-hand man. At the name of Alva Hank Worley, they came to a halt. Worley, a 34-year-old concrete worker who hung out with McDuff, met the description well, but was also a perfect example of McDuff's weak-willed sidekick. They regarded Hank Worley as in his 90s Roy Dale Green, plagued by his past, is ready to share. The McNamaras and a Bell County Sheriff's Department deputy knocked on Worley's door, late at Bloom's Motel, where he lived with his 14-year-old daughter. The late hour was chosen for maximum psychological impact. Worley said he barely knew Kenneth McDuff on the first visit, giving them what they expected. The marshals and deputy visited Bloom's Motel at strange hours for 2 weeks, surprising Worley. On the 5th visit, the marshals found Worley barbecuing and drinking beer with pals. Mike McNamara watched Worley's small daughter over his shoulder as he began his litany. Hank, you're hiding a kid killer, you know that? You're sheltering a man who raped, brutalized, and strangled a girl your daughter's age. That was when Hank Worley opened up to them. Worley unveils the real truth of Kenneth. After Worley had composed himself, he related this tale. 4 days following Christmas, he drove to Austin alongside McDuff in search of narcotics. They explored the area on 6th Street and cruised the University area before turning south on a side street to go back the way they had come, crossing Lamar. At that moment, McDuff noticed Colleen Reed using one of the bays at the car wash to clean her black Mazda. Like Nora Jim in 1966, who was a fortunate pick. After parking his Thunderbird in the nearby bay, McDuff briefly vanished from sight. Upon his return, he grabbed Colleen Reed by the throat and lifted her up until her toes made contact with the cement floor. She pleaded, "Please, not me, not me." To keep her under control, McDuff threw her into the back seat and asked Worley to watch her. McDuff stopped a few miles outside of Austin and switched places with Worley. McDuff started raping Colleen Reed after stripping her naked and sticking a cigarette between her legs while Worley was driving. Worley discovered her wrists were bound behind her back when he stopped once more to switch places. Worley stripped off his clothing and made her have oral sex while McDuff drove. He then sexually assaulted her. McDuff left the motorway north of Belton and turned onto Texas Highway 317 near his parents' home. He halted on a tiny gravel path and sexually assaulted Colleen Reed once again. The young woman, whose voice was trembling, placed her head on Worley's shoulder as she staggered to her feet and begged him to stop hurting her. McDuff seized her by the nape of her neck, pushed her into the Thunderbird's trunk, and forcefully closed it. Worley asked McDuff what he planned to do with the woman when he dropped him off that evening. "I'll make use of her," McDuff smiled. One of McDuff's favorite sayings was, that meant he intended to kill her. Although Colleen Reed's body hasn't been located, the police believe that McDuff buried her in a field a few hundred yards from the frame house where J.A. and Anna McDuff reside. When Worley's remark was made public, the McDuff Task Force received much-needed national exposure. America's Most Wanted ran a search for Kenneth McDuff on May 1st, 1992, and 50 tips were received. 3 days later, in Kansas City, Missouri, authorities got a call from a spectator who had all of a sudden realized that Fowler, a womanizing garbage truck worker, was actually McDuff, a Texas killer. Shocking, right? Yes, indeed. McDuff took on a new name and identity. How could one individual torture an entire nation? What penalty do you believe he should get, in your opinion? A few hours later, McDuff gave himself up without a fight at the city dump. Authorities think McDuff may have killed up to 9 people, starting with Serafia Parker, whose body was discovered close to Temple 3 days after he was granted parole. He faced charges for the kidnapping and murder of Colleen Reed. He has already been charged with capital murder in Waco in relation to the killings of Melissa Northup and Valencia K. Joshua. However, state and federal prosecutors are debating how best to handle McDuff, but they generally concur that the prosecutor with the strongest capital case should be given priority. Kenneth McDuff makes a compelling case for the death penalty, if there has ever been one. But wait a minute. Is there any difference between Kenneth McDuff and Robert Berdella? To be the judge of that, check out our previous video, The Butcher of Kansas City, the case of Robert Berdella.